Hello, Algebra with Finance students. Before we begin today, I just wanted to put a quote that I found on the board. I really love it. And in this class, this is something we truly believe in, that our mistakes are just showing us that you're trying and it's okay to make mistakes. But then taking the next step and correcting them proves that you're growing. So I really like this, so I just wanted to start the lesson with that. Today we will be discussing Unit 3, Lessons 3 and 4, which is about interviews and observations. We've talked a lot about in Unit 2 different ways when we collect data, what to do with it and how to measure it. And Unit 3 is all about ways to collect that data. So today we're going to talk about interviews and observations. Actually, this whole lesson, I'd probably take notes. You could pause the recording and write things down or take some screenshots. But we're going to start with interviews. When you have an interview or you need to give somebody an interview, you first have to have a plan. You first want to think about, what is the purpose of the interview? What information do I need to get from this interview? Once you know that, then you will write all your questions down. Then you're going to administer or give the interview. And then you're going to analyze the answer. That is the plan for giving a good interview. And there are a couple different types of interviews that this lesson talks about. Personal, focused, and telephone interview are the three we're going to get into today. And just a funny little video that I found about an interview. If you're watching this lesson recording, you could highlight this link and go to it. It's just something fun to watch. Okay, let's get into it. Personal interview. I'm just going to go through the advantages and disadvantages to each type of interview. A personal interview, when you do this, it's possible to get a large number of responses. Okay. And this data, though, could be easily combined because we used closed questioning method. And what I mean by closed is choices are given for the responses. So what that means is, instead of giving an open-ended question, why do you like the color blue? Instead of that, you're going to ask a question where, what is your favorite color, red, blue, or orange? So a closed question means the choices are given. The disadvantages of this type of interview: there's usually costs associated with training the interviewers, and this closed questioning limits the amount of information that you're going to be able to get from the interview. This type of interview is very time consuming, and usually the person that's doing the interviewing has to go out and find people that will answer their interview questions. So the safety of the interviewer is a disadvantage as well, okay, because you have to worry about that. Then a focused interview, an example of something like this is if you're interviewing for a job. Okay, that is a focused interview. The advantages of this is they use open-ended questioning, meaning they're free response. It instead of giving them choices, it leaves it up. Why do you feel that you're the best candidate for this job? That's a type of an open question where I'm not giving choices out, and I want the person that I'm interviewing just to speak freely. So the possibility of all these unexpected findings, things that you wouldn't expect somebody to say, those things you could find out through a focused interview. Those are the advantages. Disadvantage: the data is difficult to combine due to the open questioning. People might take questions differently, so depending on what somebody says, it might not correlate to what another person says, so it's difficult to combine the information that you get. And reviewing all the answers that you get from these interviews is pretty time consuming. So those are the disadvantages. And I do want to mention, when you take the unit test, you will be asked for advantages and disadvantages of all these types of things. So I hope you're taking notes. The next is a phone interview. And I think of these as like telemarketers, okay? They're really doing interviews when they call and they're a telemarketer and they're trying to ask you questions. The advantage of this is you can get a very high volume of interviews done in this way. The interviews are in a closed, secure setting. Somebody could be at their home just making these calls. You can get a wider variety of the population can be interviewed. So instead of going outside a grocery store and asking people questions for that personal interview, or having people come in that sign up for an interview, a telemarketer or a phone interview can reach a lot of different type of people all over. And the cost is lower for this type of interview compared to the other methods. The disadvantages, these time per call have to be really short, or what's going to happen? Somebody's going to hang up on you or say, I'm too busy to answer your question. So it needs to be really short and to the point. The whole interview has to be verbal, and you have to hook a person. Just getting them on the phone is going to be an issue. There's limited control. If you call somebody, they could hang up. They could say, I don't want to take part in your interview. So you really have no control over who answers your questions. So those are the different types of interviews. Let's do an example here. Which of the following questions is most likely to be asked in a focused interview? Okay, remember a focused interview, let's go back to that real quick, is like when you're interviewing a job and open-ended questions are asked. So when you're looking at these and we're looking at a focused interview, which one of these will open-ended questions be asked? So I would pause this, think about this on your own for a second, and then you can come back and we will go through the answer. Okay, when you come back, where did you attend high school? That's a pretty closed question. I could give them a list of 5 different things and they could answer. What year did you graduate? Same thing. That's a closed question. You can give them the years and they could choose from it. Will you briefly discuss your high school experience? That is open-ended. C would be your answer here. You're not giving them choices. There's not a set number of things that they could answer this question. They just have to talk from their experience. So number 1, C would be the answer. Number 2, which of the following is a characteristic of a closed question? Remember, in that personal interview, you're asking a closed question. That's let's see, let's go through these. Again, I would pause it and then come back. So if it asks for an explanation, that is not a closed question because it's not a limited amount of choices. The answers are yes and no. Sure, those are closed questions. You could only choose yes or no. So in this case, the answer would be B. Number 3, which of the following would be best completed through a telephone interview? Remember, we want to reach a lot of people and have a very short conversation about it, okay? And so we want something that's going to get right to the point, get a question answered, and move on. So if you just want to ask people who are exiting a poll, for example, who they voted for, you would have to go to that location and do a personal interview. So that's not a telephone interview. B, survey of types of fruit purchased at a local farmer's market. Again, you would have to go to that local farmer's market to find the people who are exiting to ask them a question. That would be a personal interview again. C, opinion poll of topics discussed at a city council meeting. Okay, so that wouldn't be a short, concise question that you could ask somebody over the phone. Okay, that would be more of a focused interview. You're asking for their opinion. So lastly, just a statewide study of satisfaction with cable providers. That's a really good question to ask as a telephone interview. You're going to go call them and say, what cable company do you use? Rank it on 1 to 10. How do you feel? How satisfied are you with that cable provider? So D would be the answer to that one. Next, we're going to move on to observations. There are many times when all these other methods for collecting data are less effective, and the best way to get information about something is just by observation, by watching. And that's what we're talking about next. Okay, so these are different situations in which you would use an observation. If you want direct information, that gives you all control, so you don't have to depend on somebody being honest with you. By you watching, you're going to get all the facts that you need. When you want to understand a procedure, so for example, you get a new job and you're training. Yes, you could study a manual, but you also want to observe someone who is doing that job, who's doing what you're supposed to be doing. And you'll gain a lot more from watching somebody do something than just by reading a manual. And lastly, you'll want to use this when the information is clearly visible. For example, the sanitation department in a city has one day a month that they're going to pick up larger items. How do they know where to go? Well, they're going to drive around and they're going to see who has large items on their lawn. By observation, they're going to know which house to go to. So these are the situations in which you would use an observation. Okay, should people know they're being observed? Overt observation, the people know they're being observed. Covert means they do not know when they're being observed. And you might want to think about this and think when would be a good idea to use overt versus covert. Okay, when you're observing, you could use a structured interview when you're looking for specific information. So for example, you have an officer with a radar gun that's looking for somebody speeding. That's going to be a structured interview. An unstructured is when a security guard is just walking around the school parking lot looking at behaviors of the students. That's unstructured. So let's look at this example, which is an example of a structured interview. When you're looking for specific information, you could pause it and then come back for your answer. Okay, A, if you're just observing behavior and you're not really looking for anything specific, so that would be unstructured. When you're a zoo employee looking for the gorillas' interactions, you're not looking for one specific thing, so again, unstructured. C, a new employee sits beside a veteran employee just to see what happens in a normal workday. Again, unstructured. So our answer here would be D. They're looking to see who is actually downloading music. They're looking for a specific thing, so that is our structured observation. One more example. A set of twins have agreed to take part in an observational study. Each of the twins will wear a microphone, and that will record every interaction they have for a week. Which choice best describes it? Again, you could pause it and then come back for the answer. Well, first, if they've agreed to it, then it has to be overt, okay? Because covert means they don't know they're being observed. So we're already narrowing it down between C and D. But this talks about just interactions they have with each other, okay? So they're not looking for anything specific, so it would be D, overt and unstructured. Thank you guys so much for attending and watching this recording. Hope this helps with the 2 lessons in Unit 3. If you have any questions, remember, please feel free to reach out to your teacher. Thanks and have a great day.